All right, folks. Welcome back to would be the let me count real quick. The sixth episode, I think it is. Yeah, I think this is the sixth episode. Welcome back to the sixth episode of going through each NFL division and predicting each team's record for the upcoming 2023-2024 season. Now, I know the intros have been the same, but that's what happens when you're in a series. So, I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get right into it because sometimes these videos end up being like 20, 25 minutes, and ideally I'd like to keep them closer to like 10. So, I'll skip all the jib jab. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe. Each one of those helps me out a ton. And any suggestions, any comments, the comment section's right down there for you. So, getting right into the NFC West. Winning the division, to no one's shock, I have the Kansas City Chiefs, and I have them going 12-5. I think as long as Mahomes and Andy Reid is there, I don't think there really should be any reason to doubt the offense. Obviously, they lost Juju. I wasn't really big on Juju to begin with. I never really have been. He had a really good season, I think, which was his second year in Pittsburgh, and he's just kind of always been mid. He's a solid receiver, but like as a number one option, I don't really think he's crazy. And he had an okay season last year, but obviously they got Tony from the Giants. They traded for him midseason last year, and he was really injured and banged up. And I know a lot of people are high on him, especially fantasy wise. I'm not really so much. I think that he's a solid gadget player, and they'll be able to utilize him. But the younger guys, though, is where I'm very intrigued by. I like Sky Moore a lot. I always like Sky Moore a lot. He was one of my favorite receivers coming out of the draft the year prior. I think he's a great slot receiver, and when they drafted him, like in my head, I thought like, okay, that's gonna be Patrick Mahomes, Wes Welker. Like he's gonna be there for a long time. He's always gonna have reliable hands, and he kind of struggled last year when he did play, even in special teams. But I think year two he'll definitely take a jump, and they have MVS, who's a solid deep threat. That's kind of all he brings to the table. Richie James they picked up, and I know apparently he's been going off in training camp, but so does everyone else. It's the same thing with Rashee Rice. I think Rashee Rice could be good. I think all these guys could be good playing with Mahomes and Reed. They're just going to get schemed up so well. Obviously, Justin Ross, we can forget about him. He's been getting so much hype in terms of fantasy, and maybe not so much in the sense that he's like going high, but I've seen so many TikToks of people being like, what if I told you you could get Jerry Rice in the 17th round? And it's just, could he be great? Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, any of these guys could be elite with Mahomes throwing to them. And obviously Travis Kelce, I didn't mention him, but as long as Kelce's there too, which he's into that range where kind of how it was with Brady, where it's like you can't really predict him to get worse. It's just until he gets bad, you just kind of got to expect him to be great, because I know for like the last 3 seasons, I was even like that, where I'm like, okay, surely this is going to be the season where he kind of tapers off a little bit. He's only gotten better and better. So, offensive line wise, they have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Creed Humphrey's amazing. Joe Thuney's really good. Donovan Smith is solid. They obviously lost Orlando Brown, I think it was, and they signed Juwan Taylor, who Juwan Taylor obviously isn't good, but he's still solid. Defensively, they're not really incredible on paper, but Spagnuolo is a really good DC. They always are going to play above where they are paper-wise. Their corners do kind of scare me a little bit. L'Jarius Sneed is pretty mid to me. I like Trent McDuffie a lot. They don't really have crazy depth, but they never really have, but it always ends up being fine anyways. I like Justin Reed a lot, obviously. I like Nick Bolton a lot. I know I've seen some people call him overrated, and maybe that's just Chiefs fans that are overrating him, but I think that he's really good for what he is. They lost Frank Clark as well, which I don't really think is going to be that big of a loss. Obviously, they drafted George Karlaftis last year, so I think he's probably going to get a lot more burn. And obviously, they just this last draft, they drafted Felix Anduki-Uzama, who I think is like just an athletic freak, and there's real upside for him to be like a top tier, like tier 1 kind of edge rusher, just in terms of his, I mean, he plays edge, but he also can kind of shade inside, but just because of his straight up just his physical talent. So but yeah, the 5 losses I have for the Chiefs, I have them starting off the season 6-0, which I don't think really is too crazy. Week 7, I have them losing to the Chargers. I think they definitely swept the Chargers last year, but both games went right down to the wire. I think that's how it's always going to be with these teams, but I think the Chargers are finally going to get one on them this year. Then week 8, I have them losing to the Broncos. That's at Denver. And then Week 14, I have them losing to the Bills. Week 15, I have them losing in New England. And then Week 17, I have them losing to the Bengals. So there's definitely a world where they get like 14 wins, even like 15 wins. I don't really think that's that crazy just because it's Mahomes, it's Kelsey, and it's Andy Reid. Because I could easily see them beating the Broncos and the Patriots, and even like the Bills. If the Bills are not playing as well as maybe they're projected to. And same thing goes for the Chargers and the Bengals. The team's so good that I think their floor, or not their floor, I think their ceiling is literally like a 14-win team, and their floor is probably like this 12 or 11 range that I have them at currently. But I'll get right ahead into the second team, which I have the Chargers coming in second place, which I don't really think is too shocking to too many people. But I have them going 11-6. I have them losing one more game than the Chiefs. I see a lot of people calling the Chargers mid, and I think a big thing with them is coaching. I think that's kind of what's held them back. I think coaching and their run game being non-existent. Austin Eckler and like the whole running back thing that has happened. I just think that, I don't know. It's hard to talk about, but I think Eckler is really overrated in terms of just a general back, especially by like the general populace of like NFL fans. And just because he's a good fantasy back, a lot of people think that he's like an actual decent back, which like he's not. He can't run between the tackles, and like that's why they lost to the Jags last year, because they couldn't run the ball at all. Herbert gets definitely overhated. Herbert's easily a top 5 quarterback in my mind, and a lot of people think that that wins are still somehow a QB stat when they aren't. Last year, their loss really wasn't on Herbert in my mind. I think you could give him some blame because they couldn't convert even on third downs, but I think a lot of the blame has to go on the coaching and on the running game and on the O-line. But we don't have to get into that because obviously that was last year. But I think that bringing in Kellen Moore as an OC, I'm excited for it. I know Cowboys fans and other people will tell you that he's mid or that he's ass. But the Cowboys offense has been high powered, ever since they drafted Dak, really. So, and this Chargers offense was already high powered the way it was. And Joe Lombardi, I wasn't really huge on last year, and he runs like a super, like a I don't know what the right word would be, but like an overly high check down version of like a West Coast offense. Because in a West Coast offense, a lot of times it's either touchdown or check down. And last year it was like check down, touchdown, check down. Like it was all. It really forced like Herbert to really just like make things happen. And I'm not saying that he's not good enough where he can't do that, but I'm just saying like relying on that consistently just isn't really like a reliable way to play ball. And obviously that's just my opinion, but I like them getting Quentin Johnston. I think that it was kind of interesting that they took him over like a Zay Flowers, because I think Zay Flowers would have fit better, but maybe my opinion is just wrong, which it easily could be. But line-wise, I think their line's very good on paper. Jamari Saylor played really good last year when injuries. Obviously, Corey Linsley's going to be back. I think a big reason for some of their struggles last year, too, were that their O-line was so banged up. You get Rashawn Slater back, obviously, and he's not top 5 tackle, but he's definitely up there. Top 10, I'd say. Trey Pipkins is really like the only... Him and Zion Johnson, because Zion Johnson wasn't great last year, but obviously he was a rookie, so... I don't know. I think offensively, the really only issues that they're going to have is going to be... the running back of their running game, and it's been like that for the last couple of years. So, but they've still managed to. They made the playoffs last year. The year before that, they were one game out. So, I think that they take somewhat of a jump. With fingers crossed, hopefully that their injury situation's a bit better. And I think Kellen Moore being an OC, I think he's just gonna be better than Joe Lombardi flat out. Defensively, their front seven is kind of a mix for me. Morgan Fox and Sebastian Joseph Day are both pretty mid. Austin Johnson, I really couldn't tell you much about him. I know that they let Jeremy Tillery. They let him. They released him in the middle of the season last year, and he wasn't that good, which like makes sense. I don't blame them for releasing him. But obviously they have Joey Bosa, they have Khalil Mack as edge rushers who, when healthy, are elite. But Khalil Mack really hasn't been healthy, and he hasn't really been his elite self that he was since like 2020 it was with the Bears, I think. So it's been a few years since that. Joey Bosa, He's just been kind of injured. So, but when he does play, he's great. They signed Eric Kendricks, which I'm not a huge Eric Kendrick fan. He came from the Vikings. I think for their defense, though, it's going to definitely be an upgrade because Kenneth Murray was just really bad last year, and Drew Tranquill wasn't that good either. So they would just get constantly just gashed in the run game. I think there's a chance that they still do get kind of gashed just because they're like front three that they have between, SJD and Austin Johnson. And I don't know anything about Morgan Fox really and Austin Johnson. Morgan Fox I know a little bit more than I do about Austin Johnson. But just on paper wise, it doesn't really look great for them run defensively. But their secondary is kind of where you get hopeful. Asante Samuel Jr. solid. Derwin James, one of the best safeties in the league. J.C. Jackson was really good for the Patriots. He came over last year and he didn't really play that great. They don't have crazy depth, so that's definitely one thing where you get worried about them. That's kind of how it was last year. They had just a crazily high power passing offense, no run game, and their secondary wasn't great. So, but they still made it work, and I think they're still going to make it work again. But just quickly going through the 6 losses that I have for them. I have them losing week 1 to the Dolphins. I have them losing week 9 to the Jets. I have them losing week 12 to the Ravens, week 14 to the Broncos, week 16 to the Bills, and then week 18 to the Chiefs, which obviously leaves them 11-6. And I think that their ceiling, they could be like a 13-win team. I don't really think that's realistic for them just because their defense really isn't as well-rounded and doesn't have the depth that you might like. But I think their floor could be like an 8-win team, 9-win team. I definitely think that their floor could be pretty low because they do play a pretty hard schedule. And there's a world where they get swept by the Chiefs and, they lose to the Raiders maybe once or twice because I have the Raiders pretty low. I'm pretty low on them, which I'll get to them obviously in a bit, but I don't know. I'll go ahead and get right into the third team, and I have the Broncos coming in third at 8-9. I think the Broncos are going to take somewhat of a jump from last year just because the coaching is going to be a bit better, and I think Hackett was really used as a scapegoat because Hackett was bad. Play calling wise, he wasn't like terrible. I just think in terms of like a head coach, the tenacity that he kind of brings, this isn't really ideal necessarily. It was kind of a weird hiring altogether. But I think you bring in Sean Payton, who I think is one of the best coaches in the NFL. I definitely think it's going to improve things, just like the mindset, the culture. The culture is going to be changed for sure because I know that there was no culture last year. There's a lot of issues, and but I don't know. I think last year big issue too is that Russ just fell off a cliff, and I wasn't really surprised by that because his last couple of years in Seattle, like there was always issues with offensive coordinators, and he always wanted to play out of structure, and he's got this mindset that he wants to run around and create these crazy plays like someone like Mahomes does, but then he doesn't have the physical abilities anymore to really do that like he could when he was younger, and then his decision making is falling off a cliff, and I don't know if they can get Russ to play within structure and I guess listen, then I think that their ceiling could be pretty high because I mean their defense is solid. They have solid weapons. Obviously, Javonte Williams being injured, and I don't know if many people know, but I don't think he's really going to come back and play this season. Apparently, he's pretty behind schedule with his ACL. Obviously, the thing with KJ Hamler that just came out, I don't remember what it was. I think it might have been something cancer related. Those are obviously big losses, but I mean they have Jerry Jeudy, they have Cortland Sutton. They have Marquez Callaway and Little Jordan Humphrey, who are both Saints legends on the team. I think Marvin Mims is solid. I think Greg Dulcich is really good. Their O-line is solid. They went and they signed Mike McGlinchey. I really like Quinn Miners. I think he's really, really good. I think he's going to take a jump this year. Their defense all around is just very solid. Their off-ball backers, I think you could have some worries about because they're a bit smaller. But I don't know. I have them at 8-9, like I said. And I think like it's going to be watchable because last year their football, it was borderline unwatchable for a lot of the season. But I think this year they're definitely going to be much more competitive, and their defense is going to keep them in games. And I think it all really comes down to how does Russ play and how do they play within structure. And I think a big thing too is like does someone like Jerry Jeudy take a jump? So but I think their ceiling is probably somewhere around like 11 wins, 12 wins, and I think their floor is like similar to where it was last year, like around that like 6 or 7 range. Because if things don't get better offensively, some of the games that I have them winning, there's no way in hell they're winning. So, but without further ado, I'll get into the final team of the division, which is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. And I have them going 5-12. And this is something I could see me getting some hate for, but I wasn't really too high on the Raiders last year. And for whatever reason, a lot of people that like I talked to personally, people that I interacted with on Twitter, some guys that I were in fantasy groups with, they all thought the Raiders were going to be like incredible, not incredible, I guess, but like competing for like a playoff spot even. And I never thought that. I don't like, a lot of people last year thought that this like AFC West team was gonna break records in terms of like being like the most winningest division ever. And like I never really thought that. Like I thought the Broncos would be okay, and I thought the Broncos would fight for a playoff spot, but I never thought that with the Raiders, and that's how it ended up being. And you know, you could say some of that is because they had internal conflict and the whole thing with Derek Carr, but I just their team in general is just like it's a worse version of how the Rams were when they went to the Super Bowl, and even like a year before that, where like they got really high level stars, but then the lows are just incredibly low. Obviously, Devontae Adams is incredible. Josh Jacobs is coming off a career year last year. Max Crosby's a top 5 edge rusher in my opinion. I like Nate Hobbs, but I mean the only place where they really have any depth is wide receiver. Because outside of that, I mean their O-line, Colton Miller's really good. Dylan Parham's okay. Andre James is okay. Alex Bars and Jermaine Eluemunor, I couldn't even tell you anything about. Jerry Tillery is bad. Bilal Nichols is not good. Chandler Jones played really bad last year. I know right now on their depth chart it shows that Tyree Wilson's out, so I don't really know what his timetable is going to be like. Divine Diablo is bad. He's an athletic freak, but he just doesn't really play with much discipline. Robert Spillane, I really couldn't tell you much about him, admittedly. Same thing goes for Luke Matterson. But Nate Hobbs is solid. Marcus Epps is okay. Trayvon Moehrig's okay. And Marcus Peters, I think, is really overrated. That's obviously just my own opinion. But they couldn't stop the run to save their life last year. They couldn't stop the pass, really, to save their life. And a lot of that was because I think Nate Hobbs was injured. And I think Trayvon Moehrig might have been injured for a while. But they just got gashed defensively. And offensively, they were great because Josh Jacobs was so good, and they had that high-powered offense. And I that's kind of what I figured it would be like going into last year, that their offense would be good, their defense would be bad, and just because of that, they wouldn't win too many games. But this year, I mean, you don't have Derek Carr anymore. Derek Carr didn't really look that great last year, but Jimmy Garoppolo, I just think is just not a good quarterback. I know a lot of people get, I don't want to say confused, but like, for whatever reason, the wins as a QB stat just like brainwashes people, and people think that, oh, because Jimmy G won like 3 games with the Patriots, and then when he was traded to the Niners, he won a bunch of games, that he's some good quarterback. And like it's kind of the same philosophy that people have for Brock Purdy, that, oh, because they're in this great situation with great weapons and like some of the best coaching, that they're good quarterbacks. And like that's just not the case. I mean, the whole reason why the Niners fell short winning a Super Bowl, and why they've normally fallen short in years past, is because of Jimmy G. And I just think the issues with him, you know, he finally passed his physical, but there's issues with his contract, there's issues with his physical. I just think it's spelling just like a nightmare disaster season for them, because I just don't think Jimmy G's that good. That's like my first thing. I think there's a world where they play bad and someone like Devontae demands a trade halfway through the season. Obviously, the whole thing with Josh Jacobs playing under the franchise tag, that could lead to issues as well. Hunter Renfrow was really injured last year, so there's a world where he doesn't get on the field much. Austin Hooper, I think, is just not that great. He hasn't been for like 3 years. Jacoby Myers, I like the signing in theory, but again, Jimmy G's a quarterback, so like it doesn't really move the needle that much for me. But I have them at 5 wins, so... And I will admit, I think that's like their floor. I think their floor is like 5 wins, 4 wins. I do think their ceiling is that, say Jimmy G comes in and they're able to move the ball well, and they're able to have this efficient offense, and their defense starts clicking and that starts picking up, then I think that they could be like a 7-win team, 8-win team, and I think they could kind of be in that Broncos territory where maybe towards the end of the season they're like 2 games out of a wild card spot. But I mean, it's just they play a tough schedule, man, and it doesn't help anything because they're just not that great of a team. You know, they have really high highs. You know, because they got like Devontae Adams I think is arguably still top 3 receiver. Josh Jacobs after last year is like a top 3 back. You know, they have those really high level players, but then they have it just falls out altogether, and it's hard to build a winning team like that. And then I don't think the coaching is that great either with the Raiders, just because of how dysfunctional they are, man. I can't, like, until they break out of this dysfunction and they start building a culture and they start just being in the AFC where there's so many great teams. I just think it's impossible to even predict them to get close to a wild card spot. But obviously I could be wrong, per usual, you know. But just to recap and go back at it, I have the Chiefs winning the division 12-5. I have the Chargers in second place at 11-6. I have the Broncos at third place at 8-9. I have the Raiders finishing it out at 5-12. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to comment, make sure to subscribe. If you think I'm stupid, make sure to let me know down there, man. Like I said before, I'll respond to every single comment. At least I'll try to. But yeah, next episode is going to be the AFC East, which actually I'm going to say next episode I'm going to do the AFC South because I think the AFC East is the most interesting one. So next episode I'll do the AFC South. Only 2 more episodes, and then I'll do the Super Bowl predictions, obviously, and I'll probably do some award predictions, and I'll do maybe some fantasy stuff. And then obviously Madden's coming out within the next week, so we'll start uploading some of that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, have a blessed day.